We're now going to dive deeper into how AI will change the skills needed over the next decade, both in technology and non-technology jobs. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the moderator of our next panel, Samuel Haynes, Director of Performance at Faculty, as well as his expert panel.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name's Sam Haynes, and I work at the company faculty where I run a skills program to turn academics and scientists into applied AI specialists. I'm joined today by an amazing panel. Anne-Marie, who of course you know from earlier this morning, co-founder and CEO of Stemettes. Philip Colligan, the chief executive of the Raspberry Pi Foundation. Of course, we all know Raspberry Pi from the small computer that everybody knows and loves to use. And Philip runs the foundation that owns Raspberry Pi and has a great interest in computer science and STEM education. And we're also joined by Paul Dongha, who's the head of AI and data ethics at Lloyds Banking Group. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Today, what we're going to talk about is AI and skills, and the skills gap. And if you're anything like me, you've seen the recent wave of generative AI and other really cool AI tools that we can all use, and you've enjoyed perhaps playing around with them, but maybe in the back of your mind over the last few months, you've also been thinking, these tools can do quite a lot of things that I can do. Should I be worried about my own job security, my long-term career prospects, how I'm going to do in the labour market, or perhaps what my children will do and how they will learn and what they should learn? Just as a quick show of hands, have a hand up for anybody who has, since January or over the last few months, had a bit of that worry themselves, like, how is my job going to be affected by AI? So it's pretty much everybody in the room. I was going to open to the panel and essentially ask a little bit of that question to each of you. So firstly, in your own life, do you worry about how AI will affect you in your career and your job? And then perhaps those that your loved ones and other people you care about, how it will affect them too. Anne-Marie, if you wouldn't mind opening for us.
I don't worry, but I think in general, I'm not a natural worrier. So I think I'm more worried about AI in general and how that's going to impact life the way that it is. But for my role, I think as an entrepreneur, someone that creates and makes a lot of things, not just kind of things, but things. I think I'm very much, I've ended up in this kind of socio-technical, I guess, if we want to say, from the panel earlier, realm of this is about people, this is about connections, this is about creating. And so I think I've ended up not being as worried. Also, I mean, if you spend enough time with generative AI, you get to see some weird and incorrect and hallucination. You know, you get to see all manner of folks that it's like things that you're like, actually, maybe I've got a little bit longer on this. I think in terms of my loved ones, I think the reflection I always end up having is, so we work with girls and young women aged 5 up to 25. And what I end up thinking about is those 5-year-olds. What is the world going to be like that they end up working in? And then what will their work look like? And I think it's not worry, but it's being optimistic. Being open and thinking, okay, cool, what are going to be the completely different things that they end up doing as a result of this presence of AI, right? I end up talking about, folks that used to put up bowling pins or folks who were lift operators and the fact that has then transformed. And so how do we build skills for folks for a world that we don't know fully what that's going to look like? And so that then becomes not quite the worry, but the work, right? That becomes the opportunity. That becomes the exploration and the creativity, because Lord knows the AI doesn't have the answer for that either.
Yeah. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Philip, please.
I've got a microphone, haven't I? I forgot about that. So I am optimistic, but I am a little worried about how we're all going to make the time to learn about these technologies and how they're transforming the world. We're going to come on, I guess, to talk about what might happen in schools, but when I think about my own children, my main thought is, well, they're going to be fine, because actually we do all right. The big challenge is going to be kids from challenging economic, social backgrounds, kids in countries where they don't have access to high-quality schooling, And we at Raspberry Pi, and I personally am desperately worried about how this wave of technological change could end up widening the gap between those who have access to learn the skills and the mindsets that will enable them to engage with and shape this world, and those who don't have access to those opportunities. And so that's probably my main concern. One of the things we've done at work is we have introduced a dedicated learning and development time for everybody to use as they see fit. Sort of we're trialing a thing which is half a day every couple of weeks, so that people can start to develop their skills and knowledge for the future.
We have that mandated hour and a half every week.
Very good. Paul, same question to you, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question, and lovely to be here. I think in two parts answering this question. So the effect that it has on people at work. So at Lloyds Banking Group, I'm head of data and AI ethics, and I talk every day to people who have jobs, who process data and sit in front of computers and interact with our customers. And they do worry. They worry about AI. And I spend a lot of time telling people, right, the human brain hasn't been decoded, right? Number one, things are fine. But we have human agency, right? If we manage this carefully, and I'm talking about corporations as well as government, if we manage this carefully, we can control how that AI behaves and how AI impacts us. So actually, the destiny of how it's rolled out is actually within our control and within our gift. But bridging that gap between letting it run out of control and deploying it safely is obviously what the AI Summit is all about and what we're here today to discuss. But I think we have real agency and a real opportunity to ensure that we harness the best of it and minimize the risks. So in terms of workforce impact, there are opportunities. So at Lloyds Banking Group, I'm running group-wide training around ethics and data, where we're upskilling people in terms of kind of data culture. So giving people skills to process data and work with data. And really the bottom line is any deployment of AI is a co-pilot. It's there to augment roles. It's not to automate anything. It's to maybe automate certain parts of a role. But the underlying message is AI is there to augment our jobs and get us to, yes, be more productive. But productivity is not the only measure, right? Satisfaction and what we get out of jobs and how we feel fulfilled is a super important measure. So that these are some of the things from a cultural perspective that we're really driving. That I think is a really good thing. I think the second part is society, right? The effects of artificial intelligence and especially generative AI on our children, on our children's children, and that I worry about a lot, given what's happened in social media over the last sort of 15 years. If we allow social media to continue to build on top of generative AI, I think we've got real problems for society. You know, our children and our children's children's best friend will be an avatar powered by a large language model that might be hijacked by corporate interests. That doesn't sound really good, right? That sounds really, really dangerous. So I think for society, we are at the precipice of possibly having real danger affecting the fabric of families and how we cooperate and how we interact with people. And quite frankly, I am nervous for our children's children.
Thanks, Paul. And thank you to you others too. You used the phrase co-pilot, Paul. As we all know, that's a very popular tool now for helping people write code, software engineers in particular, but others too. And I was doing a panel much like this in Manchester earlier this week. First question from the audience is, will we still need to learn to code? Which I know, Philip, is a question you've thought a lot about. Will we?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. But I think the word code is a little problematic, right? So, and we run the world's biggest network of coding club, so we're as guilty of it as anyone else. If we think about humans giving instructions to computers to solve problems, the introduction of compilers was a dramatic increase in the productivity, the ease with which humans could give instructions to computers. The invention of languages like Python dramatically improved people's productivity and the ease with which anybody could write a script to give instructions to a computer. Large language models and Copilot are a fractional improvement compared to what those things did. And both of those technological innovations increased the demand for programmers. More people needed to learn those skills than ever before. So I think we're slightly forgetting the lessons from history here. Making it more efficient and easier for a human to give meaningful instructions to a computer is likely to lead to more people needing to have those skills. And again, my biggest worry with that narrative, and some politicians have said we should stop teaching kids how to code, The only kids who are going to lose out from that are kids from poor backgrounds, kids who are underrepresented in the technology industry today, because kids who are already in privileged positions in education are still going to learn those skills. So we have to counter that narrative.
Thanks, Philip. Anne-Marie, one of the classic groups that perhaps we all worry about is people in industries where it seems as if they could be at greater risk of automation than others. Things like customer service spring to mind after the current wave of technologies. How worried should we be about people who work in those industries and the future that they face?
So I think we should definitely be worried, but again, I guess my kind of natural thing is that the worry becomes the work that we do to kind of counter and mitigate that worry. I think there is a lot around the idea of reskilling, upskilling, and maybe culturally where we are with that. The idea of lifelong learning, motivation around that, folks having agency and also the kind of the basic skills to then build, to learn a skill is a skill in and of itself. And so I think there's a little bit of, there's worry that we should have, but there's also then work that we should do. We had this on the panel earlier. What do we do as employers? What do we have to do as government? What do we do as civil society? What do we do as the different actors that are around those folks to enable them to then switch from, truck driving to whatever it might be? And I think there's definitely something of recognizing and valuing the skills that they do have and how that might then translate into what happens next, which often goes missing from the conversation, right? We end up having this kind of deficit-based approach of they don't know this, they don't know how to code, rather than, no, they do know this is tacit information that they have. These are skills that, we talk about core skills and technical skills at Stemettes rather than hard versus soft skills. But these are all skills that are all going to be valuable for whatever happens next as humans that are connecting, that are communicating, and are able to create as well. So I think it's about being intentional with, how does this translate? What's transferable about this? What are folks able to then do? And there are countless examples that you have of folks either doing returnships or reskilling. Sue Black from Tech Up Women is doing that a lot. I know you know her, Sam. But there's so much of folks who have been in one line of work, whether it's in retail, whether it's in, lots of different places, that have then been able to say, actually, I can see the crossovers between that and data, and so I'm going to become and learn the data skills, but actually they're able to then come back and do that data in retail space or whatever it might be. So I think, again, where there's worry, there's opportunity, and there's a duty, I think, that we have as folks that are working in this space to allow and allow folks to have that access, right? To allow folks to be able to build their agency in that reskilling, and then for them to make a decision on what they want for their lives, where they want to work, and actually what they want to be the impact and the upshot of the work that they're doing.
And in some of these industries, of course, traditionally marginalized groups are overrepresented in a way that they are underrepresented in a lot of technology jobs. Is there something specific that we need to do to help those groups in these industries?
Yeah, I think we need to be intentional about those groups, and we need to employ equitable practice in the way that we distribute these skills and do the work that we're doing. I think there's a lot of, there's not enough listening and understanding and valuing of historically marginalized and minoritized communities. And so if we're not listening, why is it, something as simple as childcare doesn't get covered. When folks are doing degree courses or whatever it might be, you're funding the study, but you're not funding the everything else that goes around it. And, a lot of these folks end up caring, unpaid care, paid care, all the rest of it. And so I think we have to have equitable practice in who are we working with, how are we recognizing not just the value that they have, but the support that they need around it, and how are we doing that for communities, and how are we doing that in cohorts, rather than purely doing it for individuals and picking up those individuals and saying, I'm going to do it for that person. But it's like, how are we doing that for the collective? How are we understanding that community? How are we tapping into the needs that they have? And how are we meeting them part way? But also, what are we transforming in the way that we deliver skills and the types of skills that we're wanting folks to build? And it's not just, I'm the computer scientist that build the technology, this is the skill I think is important, but how we then also able to value and know, the skills that they have and reflect that in the way that we're building technology. So we were talking yesterday about, it not just being about, there's a skill that we need in co-creation, right? There's a skill that we need in empathy. There's a skill that we need in equitable practice. And so we need to develop that as well as the minoritized groups, because it's not just about them changing to mold to the world that we've created.
Yes, absolutely. Paul, I was going to ask you about those who commission, manage, govern, build AI. What skills are needed in our businesses, in our governments to do that well?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two diverse skills that are coming to the fore. There's clearly your practitioners in building large language models, people that understand transformer architectures and all the complexities of building and fine-tuning models. That's a highly technical job in the most part. But actually, what large language models and generative AI is going to be able to do is for the vast amount of technical people, it's going to mean they can be less technical because of the way of interacting with these systems. You do it through something called prompt engineering, which sounds a bit mysterious, and some of the tools around fine-tuning are highly automated. And in fact, the skills needed to get some of these systems to work are not highly technical skills. You don't have to be a programmer in an assembly or program a Raspberry Pi. You know, we've abstracted away from a lot of those levels of detail to make the skills needed to make those models work more like human skills, more like experts in a particular field. So I think what we're going to see in terms of skills is people need to be very data literate, right? So the ability to analyze data, look at data, draw conclusions from data is really important. And that sounds like a really technical job, but some of the technologies out there at the moment are going to enable that to happen really easily. In fact, we're seeing it already. I think other skills that we're going to need is things like empathy and a real view of understanding that this is a techno-social problem. These technology systems affect us as society and affect us as people. So skills in understanding how to create a job that's actually fulfilling for people, that has a benefit for society. And we're all citizens, whether we're at work or whether we're not at work. So how can we create a culture and leverage these technologies so that we do live a better life? And I think those kind of skills, they're really early at the moment. We don't really understand, and there's no job description for that. But I do believe that using AI will actually give us an opportunity to create those skills that will enable us to live better quality life, to look after people, to empathize more. and a real essential ingredient of that is having diversity of thought. Diversity and inclusion is so important. Again, at Lloyds, we do this a lot. We're really, really strong on bringing women into data, right? We think that's really important, bringing ethnic minorities in. And I think that should continue. We've seen great things from that. And I think skills around that need to be propagated and continued. So I think those are some of the skills we'll see.
Thanks, Paul. Philip, I'm just going to ask one last question before we go to the audience for some Q&A. I have young children. Your children are a little bit older. But if you imagine a child now who's facing important education choices, which GCSEs should I do, which A-levels, should I do an apprenticeship, in what? What advice should we be giving those people?
This is a great question. I mean, I think that this age 11 to 14 is really critical. And what we've been doing, focused on recently, is figuring out what young people in that age bracket should learn about AI and how it's changing the world and the role it could play in their lives, so that they can take the choices that are meaningful for them. And I think we need to be very explicit about the different levels of this. So social and ethical is huge. They have to understand the way that these technologies are already changing their lives, and how, if they become an actor in this sector, how they can apply technology for good. I think there is a level which is about the application of human-computer interaction, as you were describing. But then I do think we need to give a fundamental understanding. Everyone doesn't need to be an engineer, but of how these models are built, how data is driving what these systems are doing, and also the machine level. How are these systems being built? I think if we can open that up in a way that's accessible to children from all backgrounds, then they will be able to take the choices about what role they want AI to play in their lives. And the thing I would say is this isn't only about young people, right? AI literacy only works for young people if we have AI literacy for educators. And if I had one ask of political parties going into this election, is they make a big commitment to investing in professional development for teachers. We don't give nearly enough focus on how do we support teachers to be able to teach these subjects effectively. And that's what will enable us to reach all young people.
Thank you. Just going to open to questions from the audience. Please keep your questions concise. But anybody have a question for our panelists today?
Oh, we can see them now.
Yes, very right. At the back there. The gentleman with the hat on.
And this comes from a guy who is a PhD in human-computer interaction. I've worked with him for years, very experienced, 30-year professional. Oh, hello, everyone. And he's been testing out AI for the past 6 months, 9 months, using it on a daily basis, the 3 main AI models. And he's basically saying that there is an emergency that he's become aware of over the past couple of days. All 3 major AI are currently generating absolute garbage, permanently hallucinating. And what he's experiencing is that previously reliable prompts and strategies are no longer working. And that's for Bard, Claude, and ChatGPT. And there are other people that he knows that are experiencing similar things. So my comment is, that is a risk that you are not able to regulate for. It's a technological risk, and we're here to talk about regulation today. So I don't understand how regulation can address that specific issue. And the question is, what happens when swathes of our workforce are directly reliant on fundamental technologies which stop working, particularly younger generations who may not be able to tell that they've stopped working?
Thank you. Go on, Paul, please.
Yeah, no, happy to say that, thank you. No, and I think, you mentioned hallucinations, which I like to term misinformation, because humans hallucinate, machines don't, right? So misinformation. That is probably the single biggest risk with these kind of technologies. So we're addressing that, right? We have work that we're undertaking to try and tackle that head on. But I think ultimately it's about education and telling people that actually these models that give very plausible answers, very plausible, but you're tempted to want to believe it because it sounds so plausible. No, we don't do that, absolutely don't. We should have someone that checks everything that's produced by these language models and then validates and verifies that. Now, in a work context, we can do that, right? We can employ people to do that. And there are various techniques that can help support that. But I think the danger then you've highlighted right there is when it goes out in society and people start believing these models. These models are approximations built on something that actually isn't really properly scientific, and it has to really be looked at very carefully. But getting that message across to people, citizens, to say, look, these language models, right, they do make stuff up, and you need to check everything that's produced and verify yourself. That message needs to get home, and I don't think it's there yet.
It's not a new problem,
Right.
what you've described, right? You have it with autopilot on planes, right? And unfortunately, when it does happen, it kind of ends up being an incredibly serious upshot of that pilot, they're either old school and knows how to then do manual override and do what they need to do, or they don't. And we've seen stories again and again and again of what happens. I think it's a big reason why I feel that the need to code, to go back to Samuel's question, is still an important one, that if folks can try and can take a stab and can be on that journey, it'll be good for them to do that so they have an understanding, a really rudimentary understanding of what's going on, and so we don't then end up having this over-reliance on whatever the technology might be. In terms of regulation, I think there's definitely space, they've put the minutes up, I think there's definitely space to regulate, to have a certain set of standards that we hold folks to before they release these things out. And I think there's space to do that, whether that's what they're deciding on the other end, whether that's, whether anyone that's marking their own homework is ever going to suggest that. I don't know that we're going to get there, but there's definitely space for regulators to say if it doesn't meet this standard, every time you put a new version out, every time you're doing X, Y, and Z, then it's not safe to be out there. You have it with food, so why wouldn't we have that with where these large language models end up happening? I mean, again, that's nationally, different folks have different standards they set for food, right? So that's in the hand of the regulators and the folks in charge, but it can go some way. It might not mitigate the entirety of it, but it can go some way. But that's not a new problem. It's not a new scenario.
One sentence, if I can. It's not a new problem because humans also generate garbage information that other people consume. And teaching everybody to be as critical of what these systems spit out as of anything you hear out of another human or read online or anything else. It's the same problem, right? We just have to not assume because it's a machine, it's magical and right. It isn't.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you. Get another question from the audience. Lady with a hand up in the middle.
Hi, Teresa from Global Council. We've recently published a study which looks into who is most likely to take up this technology first and what are their requirements, what kind of regulation do they want? Now, one of the interesting findings we've had is that women and older people are less likely to take up a technology like ChatGPT. And that has been recently reaffirmed in other studies. So I'm wondering, previously we've had the idea that people would not take up certain technologies because they lack the skills, but I would say the threshold of actually using something like ChatGPT is very low in terms of the skills that you need. So what do you think are the reasons for certain groups not using this technology? How can we address that gap? And what kind of organizational measures would we need?
I'm trying. I don't want to get anybody in trouble or say anything I shouldn't say. There's a distrust. If the systems haven't worked for you beforehand, they haven't represented you, they haven't met your needs, they've been used to reinforce power structures that don't work in your favor, why would you step into it again? Right? We've got academics who are leaving Twitter this week because of, again, things happening, repercussions for freedom of speech or not, right? That, we've got women being a woman on the internet, like that's a whole thing, right? And you're like, actually, I'm not going to do this. The way I use social media is completely different to how I would if I wasn't a young black woman in the space that I'm in. And so I think, again, to my point earlier, it's about changing those systems and being able to ensure that there are those safeguards, that folks are represented. And it's why I do, with so much further what I do at Stemettes, that it's like, no, if you're creating those systems and you're involved, if you're behind the scenes, there'll be some influence that you have to ensure that it's not something that's going to forget that you exist. It's not something that's going to make a decision against you, your existence, your experience, and what benefits you should have in life as a result of using that system. And so I think it is an internal thing that we have to reflect on. If it's not serving their needs and they can't see that it's not actually going to cause harm to them, then why would that be something they're going to step in and do? But I think the benefit and like I said, the opportunity of this is we do have the space as long as if we're not invited to the table, we're making our own tables and creating our own things, right? And I think this is a time in history where we've got a lot more agency on that front than maybe we have done in previous iterations of technical tools.
Thank you very much to all of you. I'm one of those people where, unlike you, perhaps, Henry, I do worry. And my feelings about skills gap and AI in general, they kind of vacillate between positivity of like everything's going to be fine, and it can be literally the next day, and do my kids even need to go to school anymore? It's on my mind,
They must love that.
Legally, they do.
Like Daddy said I didn't need to go today.
Spoiler, they do.
Yay!
Thank you so much for your insightful views and ideas, and in some ways, for me personally, like a bit of reassurance to us all about the future. I think there is going to be a skills gap, as we know. There's a lot of work to do, as you put it, Anne-Marie. But we're fortunate that we have people like yourselves helping do that work. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.